Great. Hi, good to be here again. Good to see you all. So it's been a little while. It's great to be back. I know my friend Fred Luskin was here last week, and if I'd known that, I would have dressed down a little bit. He loves the teasing. So we were talking about transformation and expansion. So it's probably useful to start maybe with talking about, start with a joke about two transformative characters in history. So of course it's going to be a Trump joke, and for better and for worse. And so Trump goes, he just came back from a trip to Israel, right? So that's the joke is appropriate. Trump goes to Jerusalem with his delegation, and through the course of the visit, Trump dies. And so the undertaker goes to the delegation and says, we can either bury him here in Jerusalem for $50, or take him back to the US, $50,000. And they said, well, we have to talk it over. They go to the side, they argue, and finally they said, okay, we made a decision, said what's going to be, we're going to take him back. And he says, okay, that's fine, but I don't understand. Why not just bury him here, $50? Why spend $50,000 taking him back? And the delegation says, well, the last time someone caused this much hoopla in the world was buried in Jerusalem. He woke up 3 days later. We can't take that.
Oh, that's a good one.
So there's different aspects to transformation and humility, and humility is one of the concepts we talk about in wisdom, that we never quite know how things turn out. You know, a lot of people have spoken to me, and a lot of my clients for a few months have been able to talk about nothing less than Trump, and it's one of the stories that many of you have already know in different versions is the maybe story, and the maybe story runs, it's a parable that has different forms. One of them is two neighbors, farmers, haven't seen each other in years, and they finally hook up on the road and says, one asks how's life been going? Says, well, a couple of years ago my barn burned down. Says, oh, that's a terrible story. So in that case, but on the other hand, my horses made it out okay. So in that case, that's great, I'm happy for you, great story. Well, maybe because then my son rode the horse, fell off, broke his leg. In that case, that's a terrible story. Maybe because then, on the other hand, the war broke out, my son didn't go off to war, he was spared, a lot of people died in the war. Well, in that case, wonderful, great story. Maybe, because maybe. And so there's a sense of humility where everything is a maybe story in life. And so one of the things to keep in mind is the sense of humility and an open mind reminds us of that. And so if we're not shut down, then there's a lot of options. And so I want to talk a little bit about what some of the things that shut us down and what are some of the skill sets that help us keep in mind that there are a lot of options. And the practice of these skills. Now, practicing some of these skills like mindfulness and emotional intelligence and empathy, humility, gratitude. Sometimes there's practice and there's practice. There's kind of sometimes a sense of phoning it in, and then there's just a heavy lifting of doing this in everyday life. It's one thing to say the word patience or mindfulness or empathy. It's another to be in a Starbucks line for 10 minutes and to wonder, I wonder how the cashier is doing right now. 10 of us in line complaining about not getting our coffee fast enough. So there's a sense of when the rubber meets the road aspect to it. And there's a fun joke about a monk. It reminded me of that when you guys were evoking the monk that's coming here soon. And that is, a monk is at a monastery and the rule of the monastery is a vow of silence. And every 10 years, someone gets to say 2 words, kind of to get it out of your system. And so the monk comes, spends 10 years, and then comes before the panel of senior monks, says, okay, you've been silent for 10 years, here's your chance. And the monk says, food, bad. It's like, okay, I guess that's your 2 words, okay, off with you, 10 more years. 10 more years pass. Silence. So you would think in that silence, there would be a lot of meditation, gratitude practice, all this good stuff. Comes back 10 years later, congratulations, you're now here 20 years, 2 words. Room cold. Okay, Something's not kicking in here, but all right, that's his prerogative. This goes on yet a third 10-year session. He comes back 10 more years. And okay, finally, and they're sitting there hopeful on the edge of their seats, maybe something kicked in, and he looks at him and says, "Bed hard." And as he's walking away, the monks look at each other and say, "That guy hasn't stopped complaining since he got here." So there is a sense of this, is where is the practice, what form the practices take, and some of these things. And let's go down the list of some of the things that were mentioned before in that great presentation. Things like hope, there's optimism, there's hope, there's things that we have to see past the moment. So if there's going to be expansion, it's hard to expand into something we have very little awareness of. It's nice to have intention, awareness, and to move in that direction. Now there's two things that we want to keep in mind on that at least. One is the skill sets that allow that vision, that clarity, things like mindfulness, things like empathy, to move towards helping others, for example, ego transcendence, compassion, not taking ourselves, not being the sole focus just in our own vision. And then there's the other piece of fear. Fear is at the base of a whole lot of stagnation, a whole lot of lack of movement forward. So we want to be able to move towards a goal, but the fear will slow us down. Fear of what? Fear of being judged, fear of being unsuccessful. You know, there's a wonderful quote, right? If you knew for sure that you wouldn't fail, what would you try? And it's a great exercise, because then just by speculating on that, we start realizing that we were probably not moving in certain directions out of pure fear that it may not work out. And what will that make me feel like, and how will I be judged, and so on? How will I judge myself? So there's also an aspect of moving forward of self-compassion, self-appreciation, as well as towards others. The notion of trust, if you're going to move forward with someone, first there's trust of self. Can I do this? And then there's trust of the other person. So to what extent do I feel safe? And if I feel safe, I go from this to this. And that's a very different posture in relationships. Later on in the late morning, early afternoon, when we talk about relationships and love, that's going to start getting more an integral part of our discussion. But there's aspects of these things like low fear. If you're going to trust, you want to be open. How do you work on your fears? What are practical ways of doing that? There's a handout actually that we're distributing. Should we? So yeah, let's go ahead and distribute it now. And those of you who can't stay for the later session, even though I'm giving all the promos for the later session, some marketing happening up here. This is kind of my one-page handout for one-stop shopping wisdom skills. And so it's got things like gratitude, emotional intelligence, and so on, mindfulness on there. On one side, on the other side, it's got so-called cognitive distortions. So things like all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, mining, fortune-telling. Things that tend to get in the way and tend to elicit fear and anger. And it's not a list of 1,000 things, it's about a dozen. And if we get really proficient in this list and catch them, anger and stress and anxiety goes down by 50 to 70%. And cognitive behavioral therapy and psychology speaks to that. I'm a licensed psychologist. I've worked with a lot of people for about 20 years. I teach at Stanford as well in terms of doing some work, research in these areas. And if there's one thing we learned from decades of experience in these fields, is that it's very doable to reduce fear, anger, anxiety, and so on, depression, by 80 or 90% within a few months of active practice. How much practice? That's not mysterious either. It takes a few hundred practice trials, just like any skill. If you want to swing a tennis racket effectively, how many times do you have to swing that? A few hundred times. A few dozen won't cut it, and it doesn't take a few thousand. A few hundred times, and your swing will get pretty good. How long does it take to practice a few hundred times? If we do, let's do the math on this. About once a week, imagine taking a tennis racket, coming into the tennis court, and doing this once. That was a good session, going home, coming back the next week, doing it again. How long will that take? Roughly forever. Yeah. if we do it once a week, and it takes 100 or 200 trials, it'll take hundreds of weeks, which is years or decades. There's, in the wisdom literature, in psychology, in psychological science, there's correlations between age and wisdom, as most of us probably know intuitively. Sometimes there's correlations. Unless you're that monk who's silent every 10 years, and sometimes the correlations are not perfect. And it's partially related to the practice. So are we using our opportunities to practice? So for example, in the Starbucks line, we talked about that. Does anyone get any frustrations in traffic? Just a hunch? Okay, maybe that was once. Yeah, I could see that. And so if we're frustrated in traffic, what are we practicing? Are we practicing getting frustrated? What are my goals that are being blocked right now? Or can we practice something else? Like what?
Patience.
Patience.
Compassion.
Compassion for whom?
For the person who's having the problem holding the line.
So maybe there's an ambulance 2 miles down, somebody that's blocking all the traffic, and I wonder how that person's doing. Empathy and compassion. Gratitude for having a car in the first place. Plenty of people don't. The mindfulness of being present, the opportunity to turn on the radio and sing a few songs. When I listen to audiobooks in my car, you know, how many listen to audiobooks? Okay, more than 2/3 of you, that's great. And so, you know, how many of us have had this experience, right? You're listening to one of the chapters, you're really into it, you can't wait to hear the end of the chapter, and you get to your destination. I wish there was a little more traffic so I could hear the end of this chapter. What a shift, right? And so that's an opportunity all the time for us to do this. And so when we talk about expansion, we talk about development, that's something, how we frame the world rather than what's happening in the world out there is everything. And so we can be sitting in traffic moving 5 miles an hour thinking, this is awesome, I'm going to get to hear another chapter today. And that gives us just a beautiful existence proof of how we take responsibility for it rather than put the blame on something else. And so there was a wonderful quote that I just love. What's the difference between a good excuse and a bad excuse? Nothing. And so it goes a very long way when we excuse anger, anxiety, stress, anything we can think of. It's our responsibility, starting from our perceptions to our actions, to our collaborations with others. And so taking full responsibility of that is just wonderful. There is a burden of proof of that, however. There's a burden that comes, right? The very word itself, responsibility, the ability to respond. The ability to respond carries with it a sense of responsibility, but it carries a freedom. We have an ability to respond, but it also has a sense of responsibility, which sometimes feels like a burden. So sometimes when we put off our freedoms that we actually do have to expand into any direction we want, we do it in part because we don't want to take that burden on. And so it's useful to recognize that as kind of a side issue. The notion, another aspect of fear and anger, if that's getting in the way of blocking us from moving forward in new directions, how do we catch that sooner? The whole field of emotional intelligence, which is also, there's a set of skill sets on there that you can see, has a lot to do with that. And so how do we move forward? Identifying fear and anger early, before they escalate, because we know what it's like to get to them after they escalate. Once we're going from 0 to 60, nothing flat, and we're muscle tension, and we're yelling up a storm, we're in traffic, we're yelling at people, other people on the road, not to mention some other gesticulation, so we say. So once we're there, it's pretty hard to think about anything else. But we sometimes can catch it on the way there. What does it mean to catch it on the way there? I feel the breathing getting faster, I feel my muscle tension, I hear the hostile thoughts coming, and I catch it there. Let's take a deep breath. So even as we're sitting here now, you put your hand in, how many do mindfulness meditation? Great, let's all do it together. Just even give this a minute. So put your hand on your belly, and as you're breathing in, expand your belly out, like a balloon. And as you're breathing out, contract your belly in. And take your time. Take 3 or 4 seconds to breathe in, pause, 3 or 4 seconds to breathe out. And give yourself permission to relax. Give your muscles and your body permission to relax. As you're breathing in, expanding your belly out, breathing out, contracting your belly in, taking your time. As thoughts come through your mind, they're like hikers on a trail. Let them come and let them go. Imagine you're on a trail overlooking the ocean, focusing on the waves. You keep your focus there. And you're just standing on the trail looking at the ocean. Just relaxing, breathing slowly in and out. There's no rush. It's all good. And then thoughts come to mind. You let them pass, just like hikers on the trail. You wave them through. You don't have to push them back. We don't have to rush them forward. We just politely let them pass. And focus back on the waves. And as you feel yourself relaxed, notice there's an openness. And let's bring something else into that openness. And let's make that gratitude and appreciation for something or someone in your life. And now focus on that. Bring your attention to that gratitude for that person or that thing in your life that you deeply appreciate. As you have that sense of appreciation and relaxation, slowly bring that sense of gratitude and relaxation back into the room, knowing you can always embrace that whenever you'd like. And whenever you feel comfortable, open your eyes. Just notice the difference in that. When we're not in fight-flight, when we're not wholly focused on ourselves, we're much more open. I wanted to show you a couple of fun things. When it's hard to go for something, when we have fear or doubts about whether we can handle it, and usually we can handle a heck of a lot more than we think. So, how many people have run a marathon? So, how many think they can't run a marathon? Okay, that's what I thought. I can assure you, you can. In fact, probably without even a lot of training. Now, it would be painful without training. Even with training, it's a little painful. I did one too. But let me give you a small existence proof. Like, for example, if a tiger just casually walked into this room, a lot of us would be doing just 8-9 minute miles. It would be very impressive. Now, without that motivation, it can be a little bit hard to appreciate that that can be done, but it's a wonderful existence proof that what you can do is dramatically more than what you think. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Not, there's a wonderful quote someone once said, fight for your limitations and they shall be yours. And so you want to be aware of that. The other piece is that just when things get toughest, there's a transformation waiting. There's no way, it's very, very hard to go through a difficult experience without learning something or transforming in some way. And that's, of course, that's one of the beautiful metaphors that's been used quite a bit. Here's a quick little anecdote. A few weeks ago, I was in this gathering in LA of the death panel for the people trying to abolish the death penalty. And Fred is actually Fred Luskin is on the board on that panel, so he invited me to this meeting. It was just a wonderful meeting of just really incredibly kind-hearted people who are trying to do this, working very hard towards that goal. The president of that is actually the key lead in the old TV show MASH. So Mike, what's that? Mike Farrell, I think? Mike Farrell. So Mike Farrell is president of this organization, just a phenomenally kind, nurturing man, first time I ever met him. And so he was going by everybody's tables and asking, and some of the stuff has been going on for decades, this fight. And during the last election, it was almost got there. It was like 48%. It's been increasing over time. And so they're right there, but it's frustrating. It was like 45%, 46, 47. And every 4 years or so, they're doing this. And it costs hundreds of thousands to put the petitions out. And so it's a monumental task. And so I asked him, I said, I'm wondering, I'm curious, how do you keep going? And he said, what choice do I have? And I said, you could get bitter, like many of us sometimes do when things are obstacles in our way and we lose sight of a goal beyond ourselves. And he looks at me and smiles and says, bitter is boring. It was just beautiful. And so in 3 words, it just captured just such phenomenal wisdom. And so you could just tell that it doesn't come cheap to be able to say those 3 words. It's decades of looking beyond himself. And so it just naturally flowed out of him. It's not like, well, you got to work hard and this and that. All that's true. And sometimes people are frustrating, yes, 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 and bureaucracy, yes, yes, yes. But he didn't go to any of that. He just said, bitter is boring. And so when we're focused on ourselves, so if you want it, the notion of expansion and transformation has to be beyond ourselves. If we're the focus, and sometimes it's beautiful irony. There's a stuff about spiritual bypassing in the Bay Area. It's like, I'm going for spiritual transformation. And did you notice how spiritually transformed I am? Isn't that beautiful? It doesn't really ring, it rings a little hollow. And why? Because the fact that focus is still on self is probably there's something off on that. And as we know, empathy, compassion, ego transcendence practices typically shift that focus. And so that's a piece. That said, on a practical level, it's pretty hard to shift that focus when we're like this, deadly afraid of something. That fear is standing in a way like an elephant in a roadway. And so if we don't deal with that in a practical way, all the empathy and compassion in the world may not be helpful. We may still be deer in headlights. So the take-home message on this is that we got to do everything simultaneously with multiple skill sets. Work practically to reduce fears. Psychological science, cognitive behavioral therapy has a technology for doing that that's been around for 60 years, very practical, 8 to 12 weeks. Massive amounts of fear can go down, even extreme phobias and so on. To reduce the fears, to get that obstacle out of the way, then we practice empathy and compassion towards others. At Starbucks, at traffic, at doing arguments with loved ones. Anyone ever have arguments with anyone they care about? Any arguments in relationships? No? I guess it's just me. So it gets frustrating, and the ego gets in the way. But that's exactly the point. No practice gets done unless the ego does get in the way. If we're sitting on a beach drinking what? Margaritas, okay? If anyone you want to invite to a beach party, now you know me. So if we're doing relaxation techniques and we're chilling out and not getting, where's the sport in that, right? That's easy. But to do it when you're a little frustrated in traffic, some of the bunny slopes, or Starbucks line, other bunny slopes, and now let's crank it up a notch, relationships. Let's crank it up another notch, family, right? And then, of course, there's the double black diamond slopes of the horrible things in life, the life and death and cancer and the things that are just deserve the title of horrible. How can we even hope to begin to comprehend those and deal with those when we're getting pissed off at traffic? So if we really want to put walk the walk and be able to act out what we're trying to do here in terms of genuine transformation, then we can't get bogged down at the bunny slopes. We won't have the skills when things get rough. And even when things are good, these higher end champions in our history, the spiritual leaders in our history, the people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and others, that massive ego transcendence. They're just amazing. Whoever, whatever the politics, whatever, just these figures who were able to so get over themselves that they became the beacons for everybody else. It's like, wow, that's possible. But I doubt, Gandhi or Jesus would have gotten too uptight about their latte being, a little bit, not quite the order they wanted. And so we want to be able to practice. And I'm not a big, I love retreats. Usually retreats are in the most beautiful places in the world. Esalen and other places, by the ocean, trees, forests. That's beautiful. It's great to practice there. But if what do some people report to me? I say, how was your retreat for the last 3 days? Great. 8 hours of meditation a day, beautiful place, massive gratitude to nature. Tell me more about that. Well, after that, traffic back just sucked. Let me tell you about how much it sucked. It's like, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. What is that? And so going off on retreat is all nice and good, but the practice in everyday life is where the rubber meets the road. And so that's at the sort of practical level, that's the skill set. And when we talk about practice, I think some of you may remember this, but one of my favorite go-to jokes on that is when a visitor is visiting New York and asking the native New Yorker for directions to Carnegie Hall. And of course, the native New Yorker, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? The native New Yorker responds, practice. And so, and the reason it's sometimes hard to practice, and I'll finish with this video, is that sometimes the practice is, we habituate to everyday life. And when we habituate to the things in everyday life, we kind of lose sight. It's easy to forget the good things we have. So it's easy to not see beyond ourselves. So as we're looking at some of these practices, gratitude becomes one of the wonderful practices. And I consider gratitude, in effect, to be a dishabituating practice. So for example, how many woke up this morning and said, my legs work today, that's awesome? Anybody? Okay, actually 3 or 4 of you. That's about 400% more than typical audiences. And I talk about this all the time, and I didn't this morning either. It's easy to forget to do this. I do it frequently, but not always, and I forget too. And so we habituate, we get used to it. And so to be grateful, and evolution has given us attention as a mechanism. We can't attend to 1,000 different things all the time. So what do we not attend to? Things that are typically stable in the environment. Our attention goes away from that. But if we practice more mindfulness, like the meditation we just did, bring our attention to the present, reduce our fear. Now we have the freedom to bring that attention to things we want to, like being able to walk and see. Seeing is an amazing thing. I'm looking over there outside, I see these beautiful trees. I'm now getting information about something at a distance. It's almost like telepathy, right? But we take it for granted. It's like, what do you mean that's amazing? That's just seeing. We gave it a word, so somehow it's not now amazing. It's lost its amazingness? No, it's still amazing just because we give it a word. Something amazing. So reminding ourselves of all the amazing things all around us is something that's very powerful. And so I'll finish with this 3-minute video, 3-4 minutes of Louis C.K., because to bring humor to some of these things is just invaluable too. When we're too serious, it betrays some of the lightness and the humility around some of these things. It's like, okay, stop taking everything so seriously. I mean it, stop it. There's something ironic about doing it that way. And so when I've sat in on some classes, and some of my mentors, some professors that I respect tremendously in my history, after they just gave a 3-hour lecture on subjective perception, somebody comes into the room and says something like, oh, I forgot to Xerox your so-and-so. And they say, God, I can't believe you forgot to do it, you idiot. They go off on this person after a 3-hour lecture about compassion. And there's ironies all over that. And so walking the walk and practicing this in everyday life, there's no way to do it without practicing it in the everyday situations. And so the phrase opportunity to practice would be one of the take-home messages from today. So to win nothing else, it would be that.
Speaking of handouts, do you have any more?
We can make one.
We'll make
yes,
more.
we'll Xerox it.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
After I just gave talks for 20 minutes about practicality, it's like, oh, sorry, I ran out of handouts. So, mental note for the future. Thank you. So I'll just finish with this, and again, I'll be around, I guess, what time does the other one start? 11:45. And so we'll be doing that, applying some of the wisdom skills on this handout to love and relationships in particular. So that'll be an interesting dialogue. I'll show you some other videos and things. And then I'll stick around for questions and so on. So let's finish with this for this morning. In terms of gratitude and dishabituating to the things we've gotten used to.
Back then, yeah. Those were simpler times, I think. I just feel like we may be going back to that, by the way. But in a way, good, because when I read things like the foundations of capitalism are shattering, I'm like, maybe we need that. Maybe we need some time where we're walking around with a donkey with pots clanging on the sides.
You think that would just bring us back to reality?
Yeah, because everything is amazing right now, and nobody's happy. Like, in my lifetime, the changes in the world have been incredible. When I was a kid, we had a rotary phone. We had a phone that you had to stand next to, and you had to dial it.
Yes.
You realize how primitive, you're making sparks. And you actually would hate people with zeros in their numbers, because it was more, right? Zeros, screw that guy. And then if they called and you weren't home, the phone would just ring lonely by itself. And then if you wanted money, you had to go in the bank. When it was open for like 3 hours. You'd stand in line, race up a check like an idiot. And then when you ran out of money, you just go, well, I can't do any more things now. I can't do any more things.
That's it, yeah.
That was it. And even if you had a credit card, the guy would go, oh, and he'd bring out this whole shunk, and he'd really, so you had to call the president to see if you had any money.
Yes, you had to call the president, yeah. It was ridiculous.
Yes.
Do you feel that we now, in the 21st century, we take technology for granted?
Well, yeah, because now we live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots. Oh, because that's the young people look at it, they have their phone, and they're like, ugh, it won't. Give it a second. It's going to space. Can you give it a second to get back from space? I was on an airplane and there was internet, high-speed internet on the airplane. That's the newest thing that I know exists. And I'm sitting on the plane, they go, open up your laptop, you can go on the internet. It's fast, and I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm in an airplane. And then it breaks down. And they apologize, the internet's not working. The guy next to me goes, this is bull. Like, how quickly the world owes him something he knew existed only 10 seconds ago. And on the plane, flying is the worst one because people come back from flights and they tell you their story. And it's like a horror story. They act like their flight was like a cattle car in the 40s in Germany. That's how bad they make it sound. Right. They're like, it was the worst day of my life. First of all, we didn't board for 20 minutes. And then we get on the plane, and they made us sit there on the runway for 40 minutes. We had to sit there. Oh, really? What happened next? Did you fly through the air incredibly like a bird? Did you partake in the miracle of human flight, you non-contributing zero? You're flying! It's amazing! Everybody on every plane should just constantly be going, oh my God! You're sitting in a chair in the sky. It doesn't go back a lot. Here's the thing. People they say there's delays on flights. Delays, really? New York to California in 5 hours. That used to take 30 years. thought you would die on the way there. You'd be a whole different group of people by the time you got there. Now you watch your movie and you take a dump in your home.
Nice way to say it than that, but you
No.
So the take-home message, practice, practice, practice. Thank you for listening.